This is the World Organic News for the week ending 27th of August 2018. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. We begin this week with a post from the blog B-Bomb entitled Scientists Develop Paper-Based Biodegradable Batteries to Curb E-Waste Power Wastage. Quote, US scientists have developed easy-to-produce, low-cost, flexible and biodegradable paper-based batteries that are more efficient to combat power wastage as well as provide an eco-friendly alternative. There's been a dramatic increase in electronic waste, and this may be an excellent way to start reducing that, says Sean Choi, Associate Professor at the State University of New York at Binghamton. Our hybrid paper battery exhibited a much higher power-to-cost ratio than all previously reported paper-based microbial batteries, he added, end quote. So there is hope. The breakthroughs are coming. The problem is the overall picture. The powering of that electric economy will be renewable. The steps from coal, from oil and from gas are being made through hesitant, faltering movements. There are big changes and they still need to be made. Costa Rica has had 100% renewable months. We can all do this. The current backlash across the illiberal democracies of the world will pass. The future is quite literally at stake. This form of battery, recyclable, cheap and efficient, raises a flag of hope. This is the decarbonised part of the show's tagline. Our next post from the blog, the Applied Ecologist blog, entitled Better Many Small and a Few Large, How Landscape Configuration Affects Arthropod Communities in Rice Agroecosystems, looks at how to recarbonise the soil through landscape design decisions. Quote, across Asia, where nearly 90% of rice is produced and yield losses are the highest, farmers typically own small areas of land. There are more than 200 million rice farmers, many smaller than 1 hectare and interconnected by bunds, terrestrial levees surrounding the fields, leading to highly fragmented landscapes with varying degrees of connectivity. Such habitat fragmentation in rice agroecosystems can negatively affect natural enemies, although most evidence in this respect comes from studies conducted at field and plot scales. The functional roles bunds and their connectivity play on the arthropod community of rice agroecosystems in the Philippines at landscape scales is the main question tackled by Dominic and colleagues, end quote. Rice feeds half the world's population. 3.5 billion individuals rely upon this staple. Much of the country used for rice farming is not suitable to machinery-based systems. Terraced near cliff faces make the use of tractors impossible. This, combined with interconnection of the bunds that separate the individual paddy fields, provides refuges for insects that predate upon the pests. It comes as a surprise to those brought up on the bigger is better agricultural thinking model that these smaller farms actually create the conditions for predator species and not for pests. More edge, more opportunity. A bit like the hedge systems in Europe, the bunds in Asian rice paddies are refuges and habitat for the helpful. The more predators, the less demand for pesticides. Eventually, an ecological approach to pests, denying them their niches, will lead to an end to pesticide use worldwide. Now we look at a post from the blog The Salt at NPR entitled High Yields coupled with habitat preservation may reduce agricultural carbon emissions. This follows on nicely from the last post and is about the importance of smallness in food production. It discusses the best way to maintain wildness, in air quotes, with food production. There are two philosophical approaches to this, as explained by David Williams, lead author of the paper entitled Carbon Storage and Land Use Strategies in Agricultural Landscapes Across 3 Continents. Quote, the first philosophy, known as land sharing, involves maximising the amount of carbon stored on farmland. This can mean things like planting trees in fields or maintaining little patches of non-crop habitat on your farm, explains Williams. But land sharing has a cost. You will most certainly lower your agricultural yield, says Williams. That means you won't be able to produce the same amount of food per unit area. So if each piece of land produces less food, more pieces of land will have to be farmed to maintain the same level of production. The other philosophy for agricultural carbon mitigation, called land sparing, maximises the per acre yield without worrying about carbon storage. Since yields are higher, less land is needed to produce the same amount of food. This means the uncultivated land can be preserved as natural habitat." End quote. I would argue that the smaller farms are probably a healthier way to go on many levels. I've spoken of the advantages of small farms before. The danger with these is that they tend towards a political class once established. From the hoplites in ancient Greece to the yeoman legionaries of Rome and the freemen farmers of post-plague Europe and the revolutionaries of the US, these small farmers can be a problem for governments. They still hold huge political power in Japan. Now, if all these small farmers become regenerative farmers, giving them political power by taking it from the fossil fuel industry might just be a sensible redistribution of that power. Our next post shows how the power imbalance can manifest in the media, amongst other things. From the blog Organic Matters comes the post, Truth or Clickbait? Did you read "The organic industry is lying to you"? Long quote. A recent opinion article published in the Wall Street Journal raises a provocative notion that the organic industry may be lying to us all. Henry Miller's article, "The Organic Industry is Lying to You," claims that organic is manipulating consumer ignorance, confusion, and even fear to sell a product. Yet he couldn't be further from the truth. Let's take a moment to unravel some of his claims, which appear to be based on his zeal advocating for genetically modified organisms. He claims that organic farmers rely on synthetic and natural pesticides to grow their crops, just as conventional farmers do. Yes, that's what farming is all about. Organic farming doesn't mean you stand by and do nothing. You still have to fight the beetle and the pigweed. When it rains, leaves curl and mildew marches forth. If organic farmers stood by and did nothing, we wouldn't see our grocery shelves and refrigerators brimming with organic food. End quote. That we even have to have these discussions is disappointing, but we seem to be in that sort of a cycle at the moment. I couldn't find anything from Henry Miller, re the recent court findings against Monsanto's glyphosate, but hey, you pick your own fights. That people find the need to attack the organic movement is actually a good sign. Entrenched interests are being impacted by the changes started way back last century. Cleaner food, shorter and therefore safer supply lines, happier stock and carbon sequestration in the soil are all things proponents of GMO and industrial farming seem to see as threatening. It is disappointing that these people feel a need to sprout these half-baked ideas, but if you're not being attacked, you're not making a difference, so I guess this post is a good sign. And on that somewhat positive note, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. As a podcast listener, you may be thinking of producing your own podcast, but you're not sure where to begin. Drop over to mrjohnmoore.com and pick up the free checklists I've written to help get you started. I'm also doing live presentations twice a week and putting them up as podcasts under the show name Pod Thoughts to help you through the process. Link in the show notes and details at the website mrjohnmoore.com. A transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.